Yeah, yeah. We realized we realized we had more junior PM, so yeah, Roger is going to be able to help dissect some of the concerns and yeah. So if you have questions, by all means. So Roger, thank you very much. Thank you. So have a would you always like um would you always explain right the process of transitioning from being a junior PM to maybe an executive PM or an intern to what are the levels, what are the steps, what do you need to do, what do you need to, what experience do you need to be able to make executive decisions um, for product and what's not, all of that now. So yeah.
Cool. It's a very, very large, very loaded question. That's totally. I'll take it. So I mean, I think the thing is, it's like what changes as a PM levels up, and that for me is kind of the first place to start. Is just understanding two things. One, sort of what is product and the value that product adds in an organization, and then secondly, how does that change as you get more experienced or as you move up the stack? And so I think the first things are like what is the value of product? What does product actually bring? And in its simplest term, I think product for me is the best description of product is a way to deliver value to customers in a way that extracts value for the business while understanding technical constraints. So you've got the customer, the business, and the technical constraints, and you live at the intersection of those three things. And so if you look at like all of the different product roles, like most other departments are vertical silos within an organization. You have engineering, you have growth, you have like sales, then you have marketing, you'll have like ops and all these things. But in each of those roles, what we started seeing is a product role developing. And so in the dev team, it was a product manager kind of running a scrum master. In a ops team, it was like product operations. In a growth team, it was like product-led growth and a growth product manager. But really what all of those things are doing and where product actually comes to its fore is being a horizontal department that connects all of those other departments. And the thing that's consistent across all of the different flavors of product or the different types of roles of product is that all focus around communication, collaboration, and customer centricity. And so each of those roles, the primary thing that the product role brings to that team is an emphasis of one of those three things, or all of them. And so like the product manager's role on a dev team is to bring communication, collaboration, and customer centricity. So how are you collaborating with the other teams across the business? How are you communicating what's being released, when you're releasing it, setting customers' expectations around how and when you communicate that, and how you're bringing customer centricity to what the devs are prioritizing and how they're building and what they're solving. And so you can run through like all the different roles. So that's sort of like product, the value of product. And so organizations that happen to do that and happen to collaborate better across their teams through the leveraging a product role tend to build more relevant products and ship faster. And those build better businesses. So like that's kind of why product has become popular in the last like globally probably 15 years. In Africa, probably the last like 5-7 years. It's really started coming to the fore around the value of companies that can embrace that, you deliver better value. And so if you think about it as like a product manager, how do I add value? How do my company isn't very product thinking or isn't very product led? It's how do you show value in those angles? How do you show value with more customer centricity? How do you show value how communication or collaboration helps you ship faster or ship the right thing better and have more effect? Deliver more value, either for the customer and extract more value for the business. And so forget the jargon and the language and the frameworks and the tools. That's ultimately your role as a product manager, is to work out how to do that, work out how to measure that, and work out how to deliver that more effectively. And so then going to the second part of your question, which is what changes as a product manager levels up. And when you're starting out, it's really just about execution. It's about following the frameworks and delivering from that. So I'm going to just drop an article in here. Because this is something I wrote. Oh wait, that's not the link. Sorry, here's the link. Something that I wrote that kind of is going to say this far better than I am. I'll give you the 30-second overview now. But kind of what happens when you're at the entry level, you're focusing on execution. and you're focusing on just how do I get the things down. So a junior 4 to 3 years experience is focused on delivery and execution, and your time horizon that you're optimizing for is the next 3 months. It's like, what are we shipping this quarter? How do I know that? How do I know what we shipped last quarter? Are we doing effective? When you're mid-level, like 3 to 6 years experience, you start thinking more about like, are we building the right thing and are we building it right? So are we shipping the right kind of product or the right kind of value proposition? How are we delivering value to customers specifically? How can we tweak or improve the way in which we're building or the way in which we're delivering in order to improve that? And your time horizon is typically sort of 3 to 6 months. So this quarter to the end of the year type play is kind of where you're thinking and optimizing for and how you measure value. When you're a senior PM or like an individual contributor at sort of 6 to 10 years experience, you're starting to think about like, how do we add more value to the business? So how does my department or product or business or thing fit into the larger business, and how do we deliver more value? And your time horizons are more sort of 6 to 24 months. So it's not like, what are we shipping this quarter, but are we putting in place the right stuff this quarter to help the business achieve our goals for this year or this quarter, and how do we tie into that? And then once you're sort of 10 plus years experience at like a head of product or COP or whatever that is, then your question is much more holistic of like, what do we need to win? What does it look like when this company succeeds? And how do we need to structure the organization, the communication, the collaboration, the processes, the things we build, the way in which we build in order to maximize our business strategy and execute on that? And the time horizon of what you should be measuring success on is closer to sort of 18 to 36 months. It's not about what we're doing this quarter. It's not even what we're about to like get to this year. It's like in 18 to 24 months or 36 months, are we a significantly better company because of the strategies and the decisions I've taken? And so that's really where what changes as you roll up and how your mentality and time horizon and focus areas shift as you move through the org and you grow your product career.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like Fortune's back.
Okay, hi Roger.
Hey Fortune.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm sorry I was late. I just got in.
Lagos traffic, eh?
Okay, so great answer, Roger. So I think the next question I would ask would be a more interesting one. So can you tell us about something that's happened while you were interviewing or hiring a product person, something that stuck with you? So something that an interviewee did. So either something very good or very bad that they did that stuck to you, that you are sure you would never forget, right?
I've published quite a lot, and I had a PM articulate. They'd clearly done their homework on me and articulated my frameworks and used like one of my articles to actually deliver the case study. I ended up not hiring them for like a whole bunch of reasons. We ended up going with a different candidate, but that really stuck with me. It's like, okay, this person really has done their homework and has really moved the needle here. So that was one way to like impress, is like, if the person does publish or write, if you know who you're going to be hiring for, who you're going to be working for, to be able to like take reference their own work in how you deliver the case study, like that's definitely going to be a way to stand out, because obviously the person's going to resonate with that. I mean, yeah, I think things that are just red flags, I rule them out pretty quickly and move on. But things like overly like AI generated cover letters and stuff that it's just so obviously fluff, it's just a waste of my time. And another huge red flag for me when looking at CVs and applications is just like little things like punctuation. And like, if you can't be detail orientated enough to get the punctuation right, like put full stops at the end of your sentences, and like actually have like straight, if you're not the kind of person who can think and like have all your bullet points aligned, like one or two of them are like all over the place, that's a huge red sign that you're just not going to be a fit for thinking in a structured, methodical way. So it's like little things like that for me, it tells. I wouldn't even take an interview with a person like that.
Okay, so that's very interesting. So I feel like your last part about punctuation was very interesting, because I have an associate that so she's customer facing. So I tell her when she's talking to customers that I need to see our texts, that our texts have some sort of structure and intentionality to our conversations. So I want it to feel like every time she's talking, like she has thought through that particular sentence in the paragraph. So I feel like that's like a piece of intentionality for me. Yeah. So when I see a text, I'm like, oh, why did you say this particular 5 words? What does it mean? What did you
Yeah.
intend that it would do? So I think that kind of thoroughness is
Yeah.
interesting.
It's just a level of professionalism. Like they're going
Yeah.
to take the task on seriously and they're going to deliver it at a high enough quality. So.
Yeah, sorry, detail oriented. That's interesting. So Juliet as a hand up. Hi Juliet. Good evening.
Hello, Fortune, and good evening. Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Hi.
Hey,
So
Juliet.
yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if my situation is a question, but it's something that has been bothering me, and I'm looking for a way to speak to fellow PMs about it. I know if I'm the only one in the struggle, right? So I have a situation right now. I get PM roles. I'm actually new. I think that this is my second year. I started with internship. I think my ever first experience as a PM has to be my internship. That's when I had to like work with designers, with developers, to come up with the product. Though the product hasn't gone live, but like I was able to like work as a PM based on what I was trained. Come up with product requirement documents, come up with user flow, user stories, all of that. And when I got my first PM job, I I I was not working as a PM, right? But I signed the contract of a PM. So it was a startup, and I understood that as a startup company, I can actually have to wear a lot of hats, and I understood that, right? But the issue I had was when I was constantly being, in fact, I started working as a social media manager. That was just the role I was doing there. And I complained to someone, and the person was like, okay, try to make yourself useful, try to let them know that you're a PM, come up with something. We came up with the product requirement document, to direct, the work what we are building, refined and put towards our mission, vision, all of that. And my CEO was actually impressed, right? He said, okay, he liked it, and now he has a direction of what he wants to do, how to approach the designers and all of that, how to start. And I was like, okay, fine, cool. But like, just went back to telling me, oh, we need our social media presence to be very obvious. We need to work on our social media presence, and that was where I was placed again. I was like, okay, fine. I didn't want to complain, right? I didn't
Okay.
want to be.
Okay. So is the problem that you are finding difficulty staying in a product facing role in your organization?
Yeah, but not working as a PM. I
Okay.
resigned and I went and I had to get another job, right? Most times I get jobs from startup companies, right? Kind of being referred by my friends and all of that. And the second job role is the same thing, marketing. I don't understand. I am not a marketer. I'm not a social media person. Why am I being placed in these roles? Why? Why? So
Okay. Sorry, did I interrupt you? So Roger, I think this might be an interesting problem when
Yeah.
I think it's a startup specific problem. What do you think about it?
Yeah,
When
totally.
you
So, hard relate. Hard relate. Julia, I'm also the same thing. I mean, even as I'm a CPO, and I mean, I get pulled into customer issues, customer complaints, bug fixing. I review the marketing newsletter that goes out. I write my own product update newsletter that goes out. I'm like improving. I write a lot of our own internal docs and like help docs. And that sort of stuff. I did a complete revamp of the entire structure and thing around the help docs. So I spent a lot of time. I spent almost 50% of my time, like for the last 2 weeks, doing a market sizing document for the investor deck. So like I spent probably 25% of my time actually doing proper product work in that sense. And I think in startups that's par for the course. I think it's part of the beauty in that you get to test and do a whole bunch of things, but it's also a curse in that it's just so much to do, and you spend very little time doing what you're trying to do. I think when you're more junior, a lot of the tasks will feel a lot more disconnected. Like for me, at the level I'm at, and how I kind of align it is thinking about like, is what I'm doing adding value to customers, or identifying a better way to extract value for the business, or is it helping me improve or understand our technical constraints and like in delivering and building our products? And as long as I can align what we're doing with one of those things, I think for me, I'm very involved in the fundraising process, which is probably slightly slightly disconnected from that, but that's kind of what the business needs right now. So it's like to that question of like, how do we, like at my level, the question is like, how do we win? I think at your level, it's more about how do I add more value to that product. So even if you're doing marketing, you can do the marketing stuff that you need, but think, how would a product marketer do this? How would we drive product-led growth? Like what would I change in the product to help me achieve this marketing goal? Are we focusing on acquisition? Are we focusing on activations? How do I measure? Like, even if you're doing marketing stuff, you can still think about it. Well, I'm going to run these experiments. Let's create a test card. Let's run an experiment. Let's set a hypothesis. Let's set up some measures. And let's like all of that, like how to run experiments, how to understand from customers which marketing messaging is landing, running A/B tests. That's all product work. So even though you're doing it in a marketing capacity, you can still relate a lot of the activities. Don't just do the activities like a marketer would. Do them like a product person would. So you can still do a lot of those sales. You can still do a lot of marketing. You can still do a lot of scoping. Marketing is a great way to like engage with customers, work out which messaging, which value propositions are resonating. Like interview customers, qualitative data, quantitative data, run some A/B tests. Like you could bring a lot of that skill set and a lot of that thinking of product to any one of those roles. And like I said, that's kind of the blessing and the curse of product as well, because product is a bit of a catch-all. Like it means something slightly different in every organization, and specifically in the young startups, they kind of hire a junior PM and just make them do all the grunt work. That's just a reality of it. But lean into that to build out the diverse experience, but continually keep applying product thinking, product mentalities, product frameworks, like measurement, customer research, customer discovery. Like take Teresa Torres' customer discovery frameworks and apply that to your marketing work. So find ways of kind of trying to cross-reference what you're doing back to the core.
Okay, thank you very much. Juliet, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. That was actually a very relatable subject, right? Okay, so for anyone who's just joining us, this is the group mentorship session by the People in Products community with Roger. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, or if you'd like to ask them to Roger yourself, please raise your hands. So Lydia has just asked a question. He said, when hiring, do you prioritize deep industry expertise or strong product fundamentals?
Yeah, so I think this depends what I'm hiring for, and the level I'm hiring at. And I think also me hiring is slightly different to most organizations hiring. So the reality is there aren't that many very experienced product thinkers in African countries, in African companies. I think you definitely get the exceptions, the money points, the fair money is, the kudos, like you'll totally get that. A lot of it's international talent, a lot of it's sitting internationally anyway. So you absolutely do have that. But for the most part, people working in like banks or working in like even smaller startups and things, you're probably not in a strong product culture. And so the person hired, like I can bring a lot of that. So I'm looking for somebody who will step up. I know I can coach and grow in that. So personally, I look for much more product fundamentals and product skill sets. The rest we can kind of teach. I think in general, like outside of me and answering the question for me specifically, I would say that the more senior you are, the more product fundamentals are important. And the more junior you are, the more industry experiences is more relevant. So if you're trying to be a junior PM person doing a lot of execution or a lot of delivery, but you have no idea about this industry you're in, typically the more junior people are closer to the execution. It's much more tactical delivery and that sort of thing. And so that requires a much deeper understanding. Like if you're in a fintech doing payments, if you're a PM trying to run payment tickets and building like payment SDKs and like all the language and the jargon and chargebacks, and you're trying to do a bit of QA, and like if you don't understand like the fintech payment space, you're really going to struggle. Whereas when you're at a much more senior level and you have more junior PMs below you, like the frameworks, the product methodologies and frameworks can be applied to different scenarios much better. And you're better at pattern. You've got more history to be able to pattern match And so there, I think the knowledge, like industry-specific knowledge, is a lot less important when you're much more senior. I think when you're much more junior, much more executional, and much more tactical, it matters more because it's harder to learn on the job. Whereas a much more senior person, you can still take customer discovery and inserts. Like it's a lot less of you deciding the strategy and having all the answers, and you rather creating frameworks and processes that help you gather that data, distill it, articulate it, get the insights, design around those constraints, and then ship value. And so when you're doing that, the industry actually matters a lot less. So that would be my, and then I would go for product skills at a more senior level. Lydia, does it answer your question? It looks like you're currently a senior PM looking for a role. Is that a good assessment? Judging by your previous question. Okay, maybe to jump into your previous question as well, where you said like, are you looking for when you're hiring a senior PM? And yeah, that's kind of what it is. I'm looking for someone who has a deep understanding of how to add value in the business. What I look for in the hiring process is mostly the questions they ask and the frameworks that they follow. So how are you thinking about solving the problem? Like, so in a case study interview, I'm busy writing a blog post at the moment on how to do a case study interview for product managers, because I've seen a couple of bad ones recently. But at a product level, it's less about the data or the idea or what you come up with, and more about what is the thought process they ran through in building and shipping this. And so like an example I did for TopTal for their senior PM a couple of years ago, well, I did it on an analysis of Sonos. And like the second slide is like this huge statement of like research has found one in something. And then it's like the footnote is this is a made up statistic. And then like the next one is like there's some stats and there's some like all like the data and the insights that I based this on. I totally made them all up. And that's totally fine. And then I made them all up. I distilled it down to like, well, if this was the research I found, this is how I would articulate it. This is the options I would consider. This is how I evaluate them. I picked this option and then went through and like scoped it out and built it and did the time. The thing I came up with at the end would never work in practice because like the stuff it was based on was completely nonsense. But it's not about coming up with the right answer. It's about showing the process, the thought process, and the research, and showing them like, hey, I can't do this kind of interviews, but this is how I would get it. This is the type of result I would get, and this is how I would respond to the result of the insights that I get. So that thought process is more important than what you're actually saying, what you actually doing.
All right. Lydia, I hope that's helpful. So Onyedika has his hand raised. Onyedika, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I'd like to ask. I had a question initially in mind, but I think I would first ask a follow-up on this last question. So you mentioned that you like to see like thought process or how they do make use of some frameworks. Is there any resource you can point to on like frameworks for like thinking about maybe problems, how you break them down, and then eventually going to like solving those problems as a senior PM? If there are any resources you can point to, would be really helpful. I think my own main question was generally around more of sales. So you have like a brand new product. How do you think about what channels to use? How do you think about like the messaging, framing value proposition and things like that?
Okay, cool. So I'll get there. I'll just share what I'm working on here. I'll show you the summary, sneak peek of the article I'm writing. Let me know when you can see my screen. You see it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the high level of the process is just like to tackle the case study problem. This is specifically looking at case studies. You need to start with an insight, like a decision or hypothesis or something that's backed up by qualitative and quantitative data. So we looked at the data and we saw this trend. We saw that like 1 in 5 users is dropping off at this step. We went and interviewed, so that's the qualitative data. The insight is they're dropping off at this step. The qualitative data is that we interviewed 5 people and found out that the most common reason they dropped off at this step was because we were asking for some kind of location permissions. So that's kind of like people are dropping off at this step because of location permissions. Here's the data to back it. And it's happening 1 in 5 people. Then you move on to, then what are hypotheses? What are the hypotheses of what we might be able to do? Like if we do better priming, we should be able to do that. If we move the location permissions to just before they need it, so there's a bunch of hypotheses that you can generate on how you could solve that. And so you sort of start with the insight that's backed by data. You then generate hypotheses or solutions of things you could test. You then need to evaluate which one are we going to go with and why. So there's multiple different frameworks. The framework doesn't matter. It's more the fact of like, are you thinking through how you weigh up the options of how to do that? You then like need to test it. So this is our evaluation criteria, and this is the method that, or the two things that we think is going to be most effective. Let's do a quick a prototype, click through prototype, and run it past 5 people to see if they experience it better and ask about their emotional state as they move through it. So we're going to run some kind of test to actually run this with users, get feedback, and refine off the back of that. And then once you've got the test, you should have a pretty solid idea of what you need to build, how it adds value. You've already done a loop of a build, measure, learn loop with refinement. You can then scope it of how do we think about what needs to build, who's going to be in the team, how we ship it, how long that takes, and then looking at a launch plan. So are we just going to roll this out silently? Are we going to make an announcement? Are we going to have to tell people before we do it? Are we just going to do it? Are we going to do an A/B test? Like, what are we going to measure? What are the impact metrics that or what are the metrics that we think this will impact? How will we measure that? What are the benchmarks of what we need to set in? Like everything around that launch. So that's kind of like start with an insight, then develop hypotheses and potential solutions, evaluate them, test the top ones, scope out the solution, and define a launch plan and actually follow it. So that's kind of the process that I would expect to see in a case study or in a framework when you're thinking through what you need to build. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So in my head, I'm thinking about like you're following like scientific method basically, or in this case for building a product.
Yeah. Well, this is an example of this is actually from that Sonos case study that I did. So research found that number of devices per household was higher than when multiple users connected to a speaker. And I said, like, this is a hypothesized statement from the top tile exercise. And then the average of 1.34 devices per account increased to 5.7 with multiple accounts. These values are made up. And then once again, user profiles creating fluent share control. 7.5% of users share accounts with linked speakers. 3, as before, a made up statistic. Families with multiple accounts have 17% more speaker components. Average devices accounted by this. So I'm basically doing a calculation of my made-up statistics to identify what this value is. The value or the potential of increase or engaging with those shared accounts are more likely to multiple account families can increase net revenue by X percentage, generating this amount of revenue. These numbers I got from their publicly shared financial statement. It's all kind of made up, but it shows the types of things of how I would think through it. So this is just kind of some of the example things that I built up and setting the hypotheses. And then on each of those sections, I'm writing like a chapter of like what you need to look for and how it comes up and how you actually deliver that for the 6 different steps. Any questions before I jump to your second question?
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear to me. I think it makes sense.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to the article so I can read through and take more details.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then to your second question around sales and sales channels. Like typically when you're building something new, a framework that I worked out previously, so I used to work at 54 Collective or Founders Factory Africa at the time. We had this framework on how to, like, the path towards product market fit and what you should be focusing on as you're building and shipping new products towards product market fit. And I mean, it's a pretty detailed framework, but the core thesis is like the levers that you need to pull at each stages is really three phases. The first one is you need to focus on engagement. So how do we ship something that is valuable to people who want to keep using it? It's that program, build something users love. That's what you need to focus on first. Build something, make it useful, make people engage it, like get high engagement rates, even if it's 5 users or 10 users. Build something they want to keep using. Once you've got an engagement mostly worked out, you then focus on acquisition. How do we get people into the funnel? And then it's acquisition and activation rates, and there's some measurements around that. And so then it's like, well, how do we get more? If we get people in, they'll stick around, or they'll engage. how do we acquire more people more effectively? And that started to play in the space where your question is. And then just to complete the framework is, and once you've got people successfully coming in and they're sticking around, you then start saying, well, how do we stop the leaky bucket? So how do we focus on retention? How do we reduce churn? How do we get people to, so we're great at acquiring people. When we acquire them, they stick around and then they don't drop off. Like that's really, if you have those three things, you've got product market fit. And so that's kind of the framework. So I wouldn't start with the sales side until you focus on the engagement side. Because part of the engagement is identifying what is valuable to users, why do they use it, what do we need to add or remove or change to make them want to come back tomorrow, make them come back the next day, why do they drop off, how do we add more value? And so a lot of that is like core value proposition around feature sets that you deliver that actually add value. When you move into the acquisition phase, that's when you're looking more at messaging and language and articulation of those value propositions to the different customer segments. So it kind of needs to start with your hypotheses around who are the customer segments and why do they use this product? Why would they solve this? Why would they use this product? What are they, like, why, out of all of the tools in the toolbox, why do they pick, what problem do they have that they pick up this tool? And then what other tools do they pick up? How do we differentiate ourselves from those other tools? And so that your marketing, your sales experiments are much more around the hypotheses of that, of one, it's sort of how do we should be clear on our value proposition. How do we articulate that value proposition? And then how do we think strategically around what are the other value props or the other solutions that my customer can, like other ways in which they can solve this problem? And how do we want to be different to stand out? So like which segment, how do those tools not solve their need? Or which segment of those customers, maybe if you're targeting HR managers, maybe you want to target HR managers in medium-sized companies, because small companies, it's just not really not worth focusing on. And big companies, the tools don't really focus. So tools typically focus at the low end and the high end, and we've identified this gap that I want to be the great thing for medium-sized companies. What problems are unique to those problems? How do I experiment with messaging around that? So it's kind of still based on the core value propositions that you're delivering, but it will change for the segments and your segmentation strategy around who you're targeting and how you're targeting and the way you want to get to. So when it comes down to actually running those experiments, there's a number of ways of doing it. The easiest way is qualitative interviews to start with. So start getting the qualitative interviews, get a set of assumptions, with qualitative interviews, you typically need to run between I think it's 7 to 12 or 7 to 15 or something is like the sweet spot. Anything more than that, you get diminishing returns, and anything less than that, there's too much variance in the answers. So chat to 5 to 7 people, see if you can get a couple of key themes and what resonates, and then you start running qualitative experiments to say, let's do some Facebook ads, and we check click-through conversion rates to different landing pages, 3 different landing pages with the messaging in each of them to click to sign up, and they all link back to our main site. And so you'll create sub-pages for those different messaging experiments. You run them in parallel, spend $100 on each of them, sending the same amount of traffic to each of them, see which ones last. Drop the one that performs the worst, tweak the one that performs the second best, and run another 3 experiments. And so keep iterating like that, and keep tweaking and experimenting and doing direct ABC comparisons to see which ones are performing better, which ones are going to get you better conversions through how you articulate that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think the stage I'm at now is probably still like the engagement stage, and my concern is I'm trying to get, like you've said, like qualitative interviews. I'm trying to get like to speak to people and test out these assumptions or these hypotheses, and I've got to see a couple of people. It's just if I'm looking at like the ratio of people that are like responding to the people that I'm sending, is probably I'm getting about maybe 3% of responses or things like that. So I'm thinking like, am I using the right channel? How do I think about better channels? Is it maybe the approach I'm taking? Is value proposition not clear enough and things like that? So yeah, I was trying to get like tips around those.
Yeah, you can also change how you're framing it. So if you're getting such low conversion rates, it's probably more of a sales call than a learning call. And so I would try and shift your script to be more about, hey there, we're launching a new product, and I'm wanting to chat to HR managers of medium-sized companies to explicitly understand the needs that you struggle with. Would you have 15 to 20 minutes in the next week to have a conversation with me? So when you set it up like that, it's very different to, hey, we've got this new product. I want to see if it's a good fit for you. Or I want to see if it meets your needs. So think about framing for understanding. At the qualitative stage, you want to frame for understanding. You want to make them the hero, not you or your product the hero. So how do you, like, hey, I want to just chat. I think we're building something interesting, but I want to chat to deeply understand what you're actually struggling with. I believe you're struggling with these 3 things. If that resonates, can we chat? Because I'd love to understand that at a deeper level to make sure that what we're building is most effective to make your life easier. I think with that kind of language and that kind of approach, you'll probably get a much higher hit rate when there's something in it for people like, hey, they want to learn from me and they want to try and make my life easier for a 20-minute call. It's probably worth my time.
Yeah, I think I would reframe. I think I'm trying to do this, but the responses I get always seem like they're understanding it as a sales call. So probably, you might be right.
So
I'm trying
stop
to
talking about the
restructure.
product.
Yeah, I'll try to restructure the question and experiment and see what comes out of it. Well, if I have further questions, I'll probably reach out on Slack channel.
Yeah, sure. And feel free to just, like, in the PIK group, feel free to just throw it in there like, hey, this is an outreach. This is the copy I'm using for outreach. Anyone got suggestions? This is what I'm targeting. This is the goal I've got, or like what I'm hoping the action is that people take. This is the copy I'm using. Can anyone give me suggestions on how to improve this? Throw that in the channel. I'll try and feel free to tag me if you like, but I'm sure other people have done are pretty smart with this too. So that would be a good place to learn.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Cool. Fortune, back to you.
Hi, Roger. Sorry, my internet went out for a bit. Someone called my phone. Okay. Okay, so as a follow-up to the question you just answered, someone asked, an anonymous person is asked, what are some ways to improve my thought process as a junior PM? Okay, wait, Roger, a quick one before you answer this question. I want to ask you a question. Did you get into TopTal?
I got accepted. Yeah. I ended up not going through with it, but yeah, I got the job as a senior PM. I passed the case study with Clark.
Oh, interesting. Nice. Okay, so sorry.
I've never done any work for them though, so it was about four years ago, so 4 5 years.
I don't think I've seen anyone who's gotten in before.
Oh, okay.
That's why I asked. Okay, so an anonymous person asked, what are some ways to improve my thought process as a junior PM? I think what are some ways to improve my thought process as a PM, right? I don't think we should restrict this to a junior PM level. So what are some ways?
It's interesting at a junior PM level. There's a little hack, and I think this kind of applies to everyone, but specifically at a junior level. A big bugbear of mine is I don't think enough PMs or PM courses are teaching systems thinking. So being able to think in systems is like a really critical part, like understanding how things click together and how the bits fit. And it's actually quite an easy skill to develop. It's a difficult skill to develop, but the action to start developing it is quite easy. And that's really to just answer the question of draw the system. So think about your app. Can you take a whiteboard and draw the system, draw the user journey, draw the process flow, draw a value stream map? Like how does value move from the customer what's the customer journey in how they receive the value, and how does the value move from your system to the customer, and how does it get extracted? Like where do you create and collect value? Like where do you actually get paid for your service, and how are those connected? Did you make them pay up front before they even get the value? And like that's an interesting thing to understand. And if you can't do it for your app, think about like, could I draw Facebook? What are all the moving parts in Facebook? Who are the different, do a stakeholder relationship map? Like who are the stakeholders, and what is the relationship between all those different stakeholders? So you have vendors and you have buyers and you have the community, and there's different relationships, and draw the different stakeholders, draw a line between each of them that have a relationship, and label the relationship. Like, so being able to think like that, to understand how value flows through a system, being able to think how like a tech stack works. Go to your developers and ask them to draw you the tech stack, and not share your architectural diagram with me because you'll be totally overwhelmed. But sit with the developer or sit on a call with them and ask them just in Paint or like Google Slides or something, just draw or Miro, just from scratch, draw me the tech stack and how all the bits fit together. So understanding where the APIs are and where your databases are, and which ones are hosted together or separate, or like just getting that mental model of how the systems work, I find is a massively underrated skill. And you can totally do that at a junior level or a senior level. But as a junior, you'll have a lot more understanding of like when you're trying to write a user story or a task, and you understand like when the developers say this is a really hard task, and you're like, but I just need you to add this extra field to this form. And what those developers going is like, but the data for that rest of the form is stored in this table, and the data field that you're asking me to add is stored in a different table, and there isn't a clear reference that ties the two things together. But like as a PM, you're going to get a lot of respect and a lot of time from the developers if you can actually, if they can explain that to you, and you're like, oh, I get that because it's different tables. No worries, let's do it this way. That shares the data more effectively. Or let's modify that table, or like there's different ways of solving that problem. But you can't even have that conversation if you don't have a mental model of the system as drive design. So I think like most underrated PM skill is systems thinking, value stream maps, stakeholder relationship maps, user journey maps, process flows, like call it whatever you like. Any of those types of things that help you visualize systems gets you a long way.
Oh, okay. Do you have a more practical approach? So I would say I don't. Have you seen the Brilliant app?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. I don't know. Do you know anything that's similar to that app, but for products thinking?
No, so I mean, I'll throw them in the chat here. Just search each of these. So a value stream map, a stakeholder relationship map, map, what else I just mentioned? A process flow, system thinking, etc. Like literally just Google any of those words, find the tool that is attached to the back of it, or find some write-up or an article or two on it, and then try and draw them. Like actually spin up Miro or whatever your favorite tool is and create one for your company, for another company, for a company you know. Just start practicing and getting the refs in, visually modeling systems. So when engineers are talking about something, you can create a mental model of what they're actually saying and think about how that ties together. There's loads of writing on this. I don't have it all on hand. I've got some points at somewhere. Just ask me in the chat if you want some proper references or some articles and stuff. I've got a whole pile of them. I can find some for you very quickly. Cool. It's less about the tool and more about the process of just drawing and thinking.
Okay. Thank you very much. So another anonymous person is asked. Hi, Roger. So on the subject of being a junior product manager, I have 2 years of I have more than 2 years of experience, and I am trying to land a full-time role, which has been difficult. I find that most startups either have an opening for a product intern or for a product manager with 4 years of with more than 4 years of experience. So how do I set myself apart and land my role in this job market? So I think the problem here is they're either overqualified or underqualified for the roles they're saying. So what would you say to this person?
Yeah. So I think the problem you're running into is very common. My typical advice for people early out in their career is think of your career like a Christmas tree. People who've joined the school before have definitely heard me say this before. I'll drop a link to an article that I wrote on this. But in the beginning, you want to go deep and narrow, and you want to do it to stand out. Sorry, I just can't type and talk. Anyway, so it's in there, and kind of what you're wanting to do. Sorry, I'm rubbing my eyes. My glasses broke today, so my eye is taking the strain. What you're wanting to do is think about like, how do I stand out? So most PM roles are pretty asymmetric. Like they're not all the same. They'll always have a different bias. Specifically at the junior level, they want someone with more experience on customer research, and they want someone with more experience on managing the dev teams and sprint planning and like Scrum Mastery type stuff. Or they're wanting someone who just focus on more growth, marketing, that sort of stuff. And so the best way to stand out in the first 1 to 3 years of your career is to be really good at one part of PM. So PM is this really broad base of like a whole bunch of stuff. And don't try and be the thin horizontal slice that knows a little bit about everything of PM. Try and be a vertical slice that knows a lot about a very small part of PM, around analytics or around analytics or around customer research or around like some aspect of it that you are better than anyone else applying for that role for that thing. So if, hey, we're applying for this generalist intern, but we need them to do marketing stuff. Well, I've got 2 years of product marketing experience, and my CV is angled to that, and my case studies are angled to that. You're going to stand out. They're probably going like, actually, instead of let's getting a raw intern, let's get this person. They'll probably be much more effective for minimal extra cost. So typically when you want to stand out, you want to try and stand out by being narrow. And once you've got the 3-4 years experience, you can then start branching out and trying to get a more broad experience in PM. I hope that answered your question, Anonymous.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger. That was a very brilliant answer. Oh, I built a career like a Christmas tree. Interesting. Okay, so Lydia asks, how do you personally structure your product teams for maximum efficiency? And she also asked, what is an underrated skill you think product managers, so I should just say product people should have to stay competitive in the future? So how do you personally structure your product teams? And what is an underrated skill that you think product people should develop to stay competitive?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the structure of a team depends massively on what you're trying to build and how you're trying to build that. I typically, like the teams that I work with, I focus more on product the way, not product the thing. So when teams are focused on product the thing, that's product with a small p, you're focusing on how do we ship this thing? How do we tweak it? What do we need to add? How do we change it to deliver this thing? And you might build a great thing, but you're not setting the team up for success to build many great things. When you think about product the way, so product with a capital P being the discipline of product, when you approach a team in that sense, you're setting that team up to be able to build many great things. But product the way and how you think about that being product centric is the whole point of it is that it's adaptable. The whole, like this, why the core framework it's based on is called Agile. Like anyone implementing Agile with a rigid framework is just completely missed the memo. The whole point is that the teams are self-autonomous and they can decide how they can deliver value the best and how they should be structured and how they should be measured and how they, like what value they deliver in order to get that. Like that's the core about running an Agile team, of being on a product team. So there is no one, it's not like you need an engineer and a designer and a product person and that one needs to put together. It's like, if you're an enterprise, that probably is going to be a very different thing to if you're a startup and you're 2 people on the entire team and you're kind of wearing a bunch of hats. So it's less about that team structure and more about how that team comes together. And so what are the principles behind how you deliver value as a team? How do you measure value? How do you communicate that? What are the things that you think you're important at? Or what are the things you think you need to get right in order to deliver more value? So that's kind of that's what I would focus on generally with my teams, thinking more about like, are we being effective in what we need, and how do we think about optimizing or improving or changing that in order to be more effective? What does effectiveness even mean for our team in our context? So once again, in classic Roger style, I've got an article on this, 10 principles evaluate teams. But yeah, so there's an article there that's basically 10 principles that I've pulled out as like, this is what I believe great product teams do, and like the best product teams, product-centric teams do. But it's not that every team needs to be all of those things. But what I've run with in some of the coaching and the workshop sessions I've run is sat with a team to run through those 10 things, identify where the team feels they're weakest at, and let's pick 2 or 3 things to say, okay, we're weak at experimentation and we're weak at cross-functional decision-making. Okay, great. Those are the things we want to improve. What do we change as a team? What frameworks could we use to be more experiment-focused? So let's use a now, next, later roadmap instead of a timeline roadmap, because that forces us to be more experimental and talk in bets and set bets and be more flexible on timelines and more focused on value. So that's like you can pick the right tool to help you become more of that thing that you need. And so I think there's plenty of examples in that article. There's a list of tools and repositories at the end that I've been slowly putting together. But that's kind of how I would think about teams and setting up teams for success. When it comes to your second question about underrated skills you think PMs should develop, I think too many product managers get stuck in frameworks and tools. And the best skill that I've found for PMs is to really be more focused on value delivery than on tool delivery. So how do we think about value? Are we delivering value? And constantly be the person to say, is what we're doing valuable? How do we measure valuable? How do we know that? When you want to make a decision, you say, we should do this. So well, how do we know that? What is the measure that we're using to do that? And how do we think about that measure in relation to what we've decided is important to us as a business or aligns with our strategy? So it's more about being true to value delivery and value creation and value capture, as opposed to being stuck on frameworks. And I think too many people, as they level up, if you're not learning from super experienced PMs who've applied a whole bunch of frameworks in different contexts, which is just a skill that there's very few people in our continent that we have that use CPOs or head of products or whatever, probably haven't worked in a number of very different product-centric places. And so they're not going to have that depth of experience and knowledge to be able to apply these tools in different ways. And so they often get stuck on, oh, I did Scrum at my last role, so we're going to do Scrum now, and we're going to follow it to the T. And when you can break those tools and frameworks and processes intentionally in order for you to be more effective, that's when you're really delivering value. That's the thing that I think PMs could focus on more than anything else.
Okay. Thank you very much, Roger. So we're about to round up, but I have one question from me. So so it's sort of 2 questions. So I want to ask you, why do you write and how do you write? So I mean, why in the sense what's good, when do you decide to write on a subject, and how do you go through your writing process? So I try to write, I try to like put down my thoughts, but I never really finish because some work is always distracting me, or I don't really want to show anybody what I've written because I'm not confident that it was sensible. So how and why and how do you write?
Yeah. So firstly, no one's going to read what you write, so don't worry about it. Just write it for yourself. I write to understand. So I'm literally sharing my screen. This is my backlog. I published 47 articles. I've got 24 drafts. But what I typically do, so let me go into the drafts. So with my drafts, these are like, some of these are just a headline. And I typically have articles in three different states. So some of them, like innovation is an escape room, not a recipe. This is literally just, I think there's an image of a slide that I did in a talk, and there's like 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs. Actually, no, I think I've fleshed this out a little bit more. But normally what I'll do is I'll just write down a concept. I throw out like a concept, I do an initial brain dump, and then I move on. And so that's kind of category 1 of articles, is literally just a brain dump. This article is actually what I've taken it to level 2, which is a start. You can see here the sentence is just kind of, I ran out of juice and I just kind of moved on. So I've got a set of articles in this state. And then, but sometimes I don't feel creative in like, or I don't like feel frustrated. Like most of my articles come from when I've had the same person or had people ask me questions 2 or 3 times in a 2 or 3 week period that I'm like, this is something I need to just get a better answer for. And so I write to articulate an answer in order to get my thinking process more effective. And so this is like most of my articles are, there's some of them start as just like a headline or an idea or like an initial brain dump. And that's when I'm feeling like kind of creative or have something opinionated that I want to get out. But a lot of the time I don't have something like that. But then I can go into one of those things that I've done a brain dump on and kind of flesh it out into an initial draft and the first draft of the thing. And normally I get pretty good. And then I kind of need to send it off to 2 or 3 people and get some feedback. And then I kind of, it peters out a bit again. So, so then I go on to the third phase, which is an article that is mostly in the draft form. It just needs a final edit and a publish. And so all my articles are typically, I think like iteration design, this is literally just a link to a presentation of like, I need to write an article on this type thing. So it's like, those are generally the 3 phases. And so I know, yeah, there's a bunch of slides from an article, from a presentation that I've done. That's like, this is the start of the article. So this is like initial brain dump. And then once I've got this, at some point I'll see iteration design. Oh, I actually want to flesh that out. I've already got the starting point. So I don't need the creative juice. I just need the delivery juice. I churn out a draft that needs some editing. And then at some point, I'm like, I just want to polish something and publish it. And I've got something that's 75, 80%, I've got a bunch of things that are 75, 80% of the way to go. I'll breeze through it, find something that resonates, and then polish it up and publish it out. So that's typically how my process works. And so I write for myself. I write to get clarity of my mind. As you can see, a lot of these questions I've got is questions I've got multiple times before that I then actually publish as like, here is an articulation of next time I can answer that question. And part of the reason why I can answer these questions off the bat in a pretty slick way is because I've actually thought about it and articulated my voice into an article. Like what changes the PM's level up, 3 levels to conversations to level up your PM, like all of these. This whole strong opinions likely is actually #1 on Google. If you type strong opinions into Google, it's the #1 Google result. It drives like 50 to 70% of the traffic to the whole blog is one random article that's got nothing to do with product. Anyway, but it's like, that's kind of what I do. Some of it is like rants, some of it is like stuff. And I typically make sure that there's multiple different states, that whatever my mindset is, when I have time to do some writing, whichever mindset I'm in, there's always something I can pick up and move forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger. That's very helpful. So this is going to be a little bit of a border, but I'm about to send a connection request to you on LinkedIn. Please accept it. Okay.
I'm easily find I'm Roger Nort at Roger Nort on LinkedIn, Twitter, Blue Sky, all of that stuff. So if you want to find me, follow me, say hi.
Yeah, I'm telling you to connect with me right now, like right now. Thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining today's session of group mentorship. I particularly enjoyed it. I always enjoy it. I'll see you next time. If you're not on our Slack channel, we would be dropping a link to our Slack channel now, so you can join. And if you have more questions for Roger and other product leaders would be open to answering your question in the Slack channel. So thank you, everyone. Good night, if it's night where you are, or good day, and I'll see you around.
Good night. Thank you, Fortune. Yeah, feel free to drop questions in the channel if I didn't get to them. Always happy to help.
Yeah, so I would copy them and ask them to you next time if there's any, but I don't